I did it all. Every camera, every hack. I am your punishment.
The flash drive landed on my desk with the weight of a bomb. I stared at the black USB stick, then at Liam's nervous face. The kid was sweating, shifting from foot to foot in my cramped IT office like he was about to confess something terrible. "I know it's sick," Liam whispered, glancing at the door, "but you need to see it. My name is Jason. I fix computers at a mid-sized college in Ohio where nothing interesting ever happens. Or so I thought. I've been invisible here for 12 years. The guy faculty barely notice when they hand over their broken laptops. The ghost in the machine." "What's on it?" I asked, not touching the drive. Liam's Adam's apple bobbed. "Your wife, Professor Natalie. She's with Trevor. One of my friends recorded it through her office window. The words hit me like ice water. Natalie, my wife of 8 years, the composed literature professor who corrected my grammar at dinner. Trevor, the arrogant freshman who flaunts his wealth and ignores personal boundaries." I plugged in the drive with steady hands. The video file opened. There was my wife bent over her own desk, skirt hiked up, with an 18-year-old boy behind her. The timestamp showed last Thursday, the same Thursday she'd told me she was grading papers late. "I'm sorry, Jason," Liam said. "I thought you should know." I watched the entire 3-minute clip without flinching. Inside, something cold and calculating was already taking inventory. Natalie's office keys on her desk, the locked door, the timestamp proving this happened after official hours. The metadata showing this wasn't the first file on Trevor's phone. "Thanks," I said, ejecting the drive. "I appreciate this." Liam looked confused by my calm reaction. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing dramatic," I lied. "Just need to think." After he left, I sat in the blue glow of my monitors and began to plan. Most men would rage, cry, maybe throw punches. But I'd learned something valuable working in IT. Information is power, and patience is everything. I opened the college's network administration panel. Every email, every login, every file transfer flowed through systems I controlled. For 12 years, I'd been the invisible man fixing their problems. Now I was going to become their worst nightmare. The first thing I discovered made my blood run cold. Natalie's email history showed deleted messages between her and Trevor dating back 2 months. I recovered them from the backup servers. "Can't wait to see you after class." "Room 314 is always empty after 9 p.m. And you're incredible. Thank you for the great help. T. Anything for my special student. N. 23 messages, all deleted from both accounts. But I had them now. The second discovery was worse. Credit card statements showed Natalie had been buying Trevor gifts. Expensive gifts, a watch worth $300, dinner at the Marriott downtown, lingerie from Victoria's Secret that I'd never seen her wear. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was manipulating a student's grades and using our money to buy his affection. I installed remote access software on every computer in the building during my routine maintenance visits. Faculty laptops, classroom computers, even the chairman's desktop. All of them now had invisible back doors only I could access. By 11 p.m., I had a complete picture of Natalie's digital footprint. But the real shock came when I dug deeper into the college's administrative files. Chairman Collier had been protecting her. 3 complaints about Natalie's unusual grading patterns had been filed this semester, all buried by Collier's office without investigation. But the email trail showed something darker. Collier and Natalie had been exchanging messages that went far beyond professional courtesy. "Your presentation was outstanding. Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner at my place. C. I'd love to hear your thoughts in private. N. My wife is out of town this weekend. C. I leaned back in my chair, mind racing. Trevor wasn't Natalie's first victim. He was just the latest in a pattern of misuse that went straight to the top. But Collier had made one crucial mistake. 3 weeks ago, he'd used his administrative access to change Trevor's failing grade to an A-. The system logged everything, including the timestamp and user credentials. I copied the files to an encrypted drive and headed home. Natalie was already asleep, curled up peacefully like she hadn't destroyed our marriage that afternoon. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, feeling nothing but cold calculation. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling their lives with the same methodical precision I used to fix computers. They'd made the mistake of thinking I was harmless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I kissed Natalie goodbye like nothing had changed. "Have a good day at work," she said, not looking up from her coffee. "I'll be late tonight. Faculty meeting." Another lie. I'd already checked the faculty calendar, no meetings scheduled. At work, I became a different person. The invisible IT guy transformed into a digital predator, and my prey had no idea they were being hunted. First, I needed better surveillance. I ordered a dozen wireless cameras using the college's equipment budget and began installing them throughout the building. Tiny devices hidden in smoke detectors, behind vents, inside computer monitors. Anyone checking the purchase orders would see standard security upgrades. The cameras gave me eyes everywhere. I watched Natalie enter empty classrooms with Trevor. I recorded Collier slipping Natalie envelopes during what looked like innocent conversations. I documented every secret meeting, every lingering touch, every moment they thought was private. But surveillance was just the beginning. I created fake student accounts and began spreading rumors in online forums. Nothing actionable, just whispers. Did anyone else notice Professor Natalie's grading seems weird? Trevor went from failing to dean's list pretty fast. Anyone know why Chairman Collier keeps meeting with certain professors after hours? The seeds of doubt were planted. Now I needed them to grow. I hacked into Trevor's social media accounts and found a goldmine. Photos of expensive gifts he couldn't afford on a student budget. Check-ins at restaurants way above his means. Messages to friends bragging about special treatment from professors. The kid was documenting his own corruption. I anonymously sent select screenshots to the student newspaper with a simple message. Might want to look into this. 3 days later, I escalated. Using my admin access, I triggered a system maintenance alert that locked down the building after hours. Natalie and Trevor, caught in her office during one of their sessions, had to call security for help. The responding officer found them disheveled and nervous, Natalie claiming they were reviewing coursework. But I had the security footage showing them entering the office together and the infrared cameras recording what really happened inside. The rumor mill exploded. Students began whispering about professors who gave special grades for special favors. Faculty started side-eyeing each other in meetings. The comfortable corruption that had operated in shadows was being dragged into uncomfortable light. Collier tried to contain the damage by issuing a memo about professional boundaries and appropriate student-faculty relationships, but his own behavior wouldn't survive scrutiny, and he knew it. I intercepted his private emails to Natalie. "We need to be more careful. People are asking questions. C. Maybe we should cool things down for a while." And agreed, but this will blow over if we stay smart. C. They thought they were being smart. They had no idea I was watching every keystroke, recording every phone call, documenting every moment of their desperation. The real breakthrough came when I discovered Collier's slush fund. The chairman had been using discretionary department money to pay for his extracurricular activities, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, even a jewelry purchase that coincided with Natalie's birthday, college funds used for personal affairs. That was a federal crime. I copied every transaction record, every receipt, every bank statement. Then I began preparing the evidence packages that would destroy them both. But I wasn't ready to detonate everything yet. I wanted them to suffer first. To feel the walls closing in slowly, methodically, inevitably. So I started with small tortures. Natalie's computer began having random crashes during important presentations. Trevor's internet access mysteriously cut out during online exams. Collier's phone calls dropped at crucial moments, technical difficulties that made their lives just uncomfortable enough to add stress without triggering suspicion. I also began manipulating their digital communications. When Natalie tried to delete incriminating emails, I made sure copies appeared in unexpected places. When Trevor attempted to cover his tracks on social media, I ensured screenshots had already been distributed. Every move they made to hide their crimes only created more evidence against them. The paranoia was delicious to watch. They started communicating through burner phones, meeting in different locations, avoiding each other in public. But I had access to everything. Every device on campus, every camera in every building, every digital footprint they tried to erase. 3 weeks into my campaign, internal auditor Deanna received an anonymous tip about irregularities in grade reporting and budget expenditures. The tip included just enough specific details to seem credible without revealing my involvement. Deanna was a pit bull when it came to financial misconduct. She began pulling records, requesting documents, asking uncomfortable questions that made Collier and Natalie squirm during staff meetings. I watched them panic in real time through my hidden cameras, Natalie pacing her office after each audit interview, Collier making increasingly frantic phone calls to lawyers and friends in administration, Trevor missing classes entirely, hiding from the growing scrutiny. They were trapped in a maze of their own making, and I controlled every exit. But the best was yet to come. I had something special planned for the next phase. Something that would crack their carefully constructed facades and expose them for the predators they really were. It was time to go public. The student forum explosion happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd spent weeks building credibility for my anonymous account, Concerned Student 2024, making thoughtful posts about campus issues and building a following among politically active students. When I finally dropped the bombshell post, it carried maximum impact. Faculty corruption exposed, evidence of grade for favors scandal. The post included redacted chat logs between Natalie and Trevor, time-stamped photos of them entering locked buildings after hours, and financial records showing suspicious grade. Changes that coincided with expensive gifts. I was careful to blur faces and protect identities while making the corruption obvious. Within hours, it had 500 comments and 3,000 shares. Holy crap, I knew something was wrong with Professor Natalie's class. Trevor's been bragging about this for weeks. Finally, someone got proof. This explains how some people get perfect grades without doing any work. Time to burn this whole corrupt system down. The journalism students smelled blood. Tricia Williams, editor of the campus newspaper, began investigating immediately. I anonymously sent her additional evidence packages, always staying one step ahead of her questions. Natalie tried damage control by calling an emergency faculty meeting, but I sabotaged her presentation by triggering technical difficulties that made her look incompetent and flustered. Her attempt to dismiss the allegations as student rumors fell flat when professors started asking pointed questions about her grading methods. Collier went into full panic mode. He tried to have the forum posts removed, but they'd already been screenshot and shared across social media. He contacted lawyers, hired a crisis management firm, and began preparing defensive statements that only made him look more guilty. I escalated by releasing the financial records showing Collier's misuse of department funds, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, all paid for with money meant for academic programs. The local news picked up the story. Corruption scandal rocks local college. Within days, it was regional news. Parents started calling for investigations. Alumni threatened to pull donations. The Board of Trustees scheduled an emergency meeting. Trevor cracked first. Faced with potential criminal charges and expelled from school, he hired a lawyer and began cooperating with investigators. But his cooperation only provided more evidence of the systematic corruption. Professor Natalie told me she could fix my grades if I was nice to her, Trevor's statement read. She said other students had similar arrangements. She made it sound normal. Natalie's response was predictably narcissistic. She accused Trevor of harassment, claiming he'd threatened to spread rumors unless she gave him better grades. She painted herself as the victim of a manipulative student who'd taken advantage of her mentoring relationship. But I had recordings that proved otherwise. Audio of Natalie initiating closeness. Video of her buying Trevor gifts. Text messages where she explicitly offered grade changes in exchange for continued physical romance. I leaked selected recordings to Tricia Williams, who published a devastating expose titled, "Exploitive Professor, How One Educator Misused Her Power." The article included expert testimony about the power dynamics that made Natalie's relationship with Trevor inherently offensive, regardless of consent. The public response was swift and brutal. Students organized protests calling for Natalie's firing. Faculty members distanced themselves from her publicly. Parent groups demanded criminal investigations. Collier tried to sacrifice Natalie to save himself, announcing her voluntary resignation while maintaining his own innocence. But I wasn't finished with him yet. I released the complete financial audit showing years of misappropriated funds. Department money used for personal vacations. Research grants diverted to private accounts. A pattern of theft that made Collier's corruption impossible to ignore. The FBI got involved when the financial crimes crossed state lines. Federal agents began interviewing faculty members, pulling bank records, and conducting the kind of thorough investigation that would uncover every dirty secret. Natalie finally realized the scope of what was happening. She showed up at my office one evening, desperate and disheveled. "Jason, please," she begged. "I know this looks bad, but you have to understand." I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to go this far. I looked at my wife of 8 years and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, "but I'm just the IT guy. I fix computers, not personal problems." "Someone is doing this to us," she insisted. "Someone with access to our private communications." "You have to help me figure out who." "Have you considered that maybe your private communications weren't as private as you thought?" I asked. "This is a digital age, Natalie. Everything leaves traces." She searched my face for any sign of involvement, but I'd practiced this conversation in my head dozens of times. I maintained perfect, innocent confusion, even offering to help her change passwords and improve her digital security. The irony was delicious. My wife was asking me to protect her from myself, but the conversation confirmed what I already knew. She still didn't understand the magnitude of what was coming. The evidence I'd compiled would destroy more than just her career. It would obliterate any chance of rebuilding her life anywhere in academia, and I was just getting started. The next phase would target their support network, the administrators who'd looked the other way, the colleagues who'd covered for them, the entire system of corruption that had enabled their behavior. No one was safe. No one would escape justice. The hunter was becoming the executioner. Everything changed when Trevor's father got involved. Richard Hartwell wasn't just wealthy, he was connected. Corporate law, political donations, the kind of money that bought influence and silence. When his son faced potential criminal charges, he brought in the heavy artillery. "This is clearly a setup," his lawyer announced at a press conference. "My client is the victim of a manipulative older woman who misused her position of authority. We're considering civil action against the college for failing to protect students from faculty misconduct." The narrative flip was brilliant and infuriating. Trevor transformed from arrogant predator to innocent victim overnight. Media coverage shifted from condemning his privilege to sympathizing with his victimization by an older authority figure. But I'd anticipated this move. I had recordings of Trevor bragging to friends about bagging the professor and getting whatever grades I want. Audio evidence that proved he was a willing, eager participant who understood exactly what he was doing. I leaked selected clips to investigative reporters, but the Hartwell legal team was already working to discredit everything. They claimed recordings were manipulated, evidence was fabricated, and their client was being framed by unknown enemies. The strategy was working. Public opinion began to shift as expensive PR firms crafted a sympathetic narrative about a young man led astray by corrupted authority figures. Natalie panicked when she realized Trevor was positioning himself as her victim rather than her accomplice. She tried to fight back by releasing her own evidence of their relationship, proving it was consensual and mutually beneficial. This was exactly what I wanted. Both sides destroying each other with competing evidence packages, each revelation making them look worse while validating everything I'd already exposed. Collier made his move when the federal investigation intensified. He hired a white-collar criminal defense attorney and began negotiations for a plea deal that would minimize his punishment in exchange for cooperation against other targets. I intercepted his legal communications and discovered he was preparing to throw Natalie completely under the bus. His strategy was to claim she'd seduced him using the same methods she'd used on Trevor, positioning himself as another victim of her manipulation. The three conspirators were now in open warfare, each trying to sacrifice the others to save themselves. It was beautiful to watch. But I needed to accelerate the timeline before their legal teams found ways to suppress evidence or negotiate favorable deals. It was time for the nuclear option. I'd been saving the most damaging material for exactly this moment. Security footage showing Natalie and Collier having closeness in his office. Financial records proving he'd been embezzling college funds for years. Audio recordings of all three planning to cover up their crimes. But instead of releasing everything at once, I orchestrated a coordinated strike across multiple platforms. Student protesters received detailed evidence packages. Investigative journalists got exclusive access to different aspects of the story. Federal prosecutors were anonymously provided with financial documents that proved systematic fraud. The media explosion was unprecedented. Every news outlet in the state covered the expanding scandal. National education reporters began investigating similar corruption at other institutions. Congressional representatives called for federal oversight of higher education finances. Natalie was arrested on charges of offenses of a student and misuse of public funds. The perp walk footage went viral, showing my composed wife in handcuffs being led to a police car, while reporters shouted questions about her predatory behavior. Collier was indicted on federal corruption charges, carrying potential prison sentences of 15 to 20 years. His arrest at home was even more dramatic, with FBI agents executing search warrants while news cameras captured every moment. Trevor avoided criminal charges due to his father's legal maneuvering, but his reputation was permanently destroyed. Every Google search of his name would forever be linked to the scandal. His transfer to another school wouldn't escape the digital record of his involvement. I attended Natalie's bail hearing as the concerned husband seeking closure. She looked haggard and desperate, her expensive lawyer unable to argue against the overwhelming evidence of her crimes. Mr. Miller, the prosecutor said when I testified about discovering the affair, "This must be incredibly difficult for you." "I just want the truth to come out," I replied. "My wife betrayed not just me, but every student who trusted her. Justice needs to be served." The judge denied bail based on flight risk and the severity of the charges. Natalie would await trial in county jail, her career and reputation destroyed beyond repair. But I wasn't satisfied yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, still collaborators who'd enabled their behavior, the maintenance staff who'd looked the other way when they saw faculty members in buildings after hours, the administrators who'd buried complaints without investigation, the entire culture of willful blindness that had allowed predators to operate with impunity. I had evidence against all of them: financial irregularities, policy violations, cover-up attempts that made them accessories to the original crimes. The purge was just beginning. The dominoes fell faster than I'd anticipated. Dean Patricia Walsh resigned when investigators discovered she'd buried 4 separate complaints about faculty misconduct over the past 3 years. Her replacement, brought in from outside the college, began a comprehensive review of every academic department. Security Chief Robert Roach was arrested for falsifying background checks and accepting bribes from faculty members with criminal histories. The investigation revealed he'd been running a protection racket, offering to bury incidents in exchange for cash payments. 3 other professors were suspended when audits revealed suspicious grading patterns and inappropriate relationships with students. The corruption had metastasized throughout the entire system, infecting every level of administration. I watched it all unfold from my IT office, the invisible man who'd triggered an academic apocalypse. Faculty members walked the halls like zombies, wondering who would be next. Students organized rallies demanding complete administrative reform. Parents pulled their children from enrollment, devastating the college's finances. The local media treated it like a soap opera, following every arrest and resignation with breathless coverage. National education reporters arrived to investigate similar corruption at colleges across the country. Congressional hearings were scheduled to examine systemic failures in higher education oversight. But the best part was watching my targets destroy each other in their desperation to minimize their own punishment. Natalie's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal by offering evidence against Collier's financial crimes. Collier responded by providing prosecutors with detailed records of Natalie's relationship with multiple students over several years. Trevor's father hired private investigators to dig up dirt on both professors, hoping to prove his son was systematically victimized. Each revelation made all of them look worse, while validating every piece of evidence I'd carefully compiled and released. The trial proceedings were a masterpiece of mutual destruction. Natalie testified that Collier had pressured her into intimate relationships by threatening her job security. Collier claimed Natalie had seduced him as part of a blackmail scheme to gain access to student records. Trevor's deposition described being groomed by faculty members who used grades as leverage for physical access. All of it was true. All of it was terrifying. All of it ensured they would face maximum punishment for their crimes. The final piece of my revenge came during Collier's sentencing hearing. I'd been saving one last revelation for exactly this moment. Evidence that he'd been operating this corruption scheme for over a decade, victimizing dozens of students while embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. "Your misuse of authority represents a profound betrayal of public trust," she said. "Students and families who placed their faith in this institution were systematically victimized by your greed and predatory behavior." Natalie received 12 years for misconduct and fraud. The victim impact statements from other students she'd manipulated and exploited filled an entire afternoon of court proceedings. Trevor avoided prison but faced permanent expulsion from higher education and civil lawsuits that would follow him for years. His father's political connections couldn't erase the digital record of his involvement or protect him from social consequences. The college itself was placed under federal oversight, with new administrators implementing comprehensive reforms to prevent future corruption. Enrollment plummeted as students transferred to institutions with better reputations. Faculty salaries were frozen as the school struggled with massive legal costs and declining revenues. I attended every hearing, every sentencing, every press conference as the grieving husband seeking closure. Reporters praised my dignity and strength in the face of personal betrayal. Victim advocacy groups invited me to speak about the warning signs of institutional corruption. I played the role perfectly, maintaining my image as the innocent victim while watching my enemies' lives crumble into ash. But there was one final confrontation I'd been planning since the very beginning. One last moment of absolute victory that would complete my revenge. The visiting room at the county jail smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Natalie sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, her composed professorial facade completely shattered. 2 months of incarceration had aged her years. Her hair was limp, her skin pale, her eyes red from crying and sleepless nights. "Jason," she whispered, reaching across the table before the guard motioned her to keep her hands visible. "Thank God you came. I've been trying to call you for weeks." "I've been processing everything," I said, maintaining my mask of hurt confusion. "This has been incredibly difficult." "I know," she said, tears starting to flow. "I know how this looks, but you have to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen. It started small and just spiraled out of control." I nodded sympathetically. "Tell me what really happened. I need to understand." For the next hour, she confessed everything. The loneliness in our marriage that made her vulnerable to Collier's advances. The thrill of having young men desire her that led to increasingly risky behavior. The gradual corruption that transformed minor rule bending into systematic misuse. "Trevor made me feel young again," she admitted. "And when Collier offered protection in exchange for favors, it seemed like a victimless crime. Just bending some rules to help students who were trying hard. But the evidence suggests it went much further than that," I said gently. "Someone set us up," she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Someone with complete access to our communications. They manipulated everything to make us look as guilty as possible." I leaned forward with concern. "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "But they destroyed our lives systematically. Every private moment, every mistake, every human weakness, they turned it all into weapons against us." "That does sound incredibly sophisticated," I agreed. "Almost like someone with extensive technical knowledge and institutional access." She looked at me sharply, suspicion flickering in her eyes for the first time. "Someone who understood how to manipulate digital evidence," I continued. "How to plant surveillance devices, how to coordinate leaks across multiple platforms for maximum impact." The realization dawned slowly across her face like a sunrise of pure horror. "Someone invisible," I said, dropping my sympathetic mask and letting her see the cold calculation underneath. "Someone overlooked and underestimated by arrogant faculty who never bothered to learn his name." "Jason," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Hello, Natalie," I said, smiling for the first time in months. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you believe you could destroy our marriage, offend your students, and steal from the college without consequences?" She sat frozen, mind racing through months of carefully planted evidence and orchestrated revelations. "It was you," she breathed. "All of it. The cameras, the leaks, the anonymous tips." "Every single piece," I confirmed. 12 years of invisible IT work gave me access to everything. Your emails, your financial records, your private communications. I watched you become a predator and decided to become something worse. "But the evidence was real," she protested weakly. "We actually did those things." "Oh, absolutely," I laughed. "I never fabricated anything. I just documented your crimes and presented them at the perfect moments for maximum damage. You destroyed your own life, Natalie." I simply provided the spotlight. The visiting room felt electric with tension as she fully grasped the scope of what had happened. "You could have just divorced me," she said. You could have reported us quietly. Why did you have to destroy everything? Because quiet reports get buried by men like Collier, I replied. Because divorces can be negotiated and reputations rebuilt. Because predators like you and Trevor needed to face consequences that would follow you forever. She stared at me with a mixture of terror and grudging respect. You're a monster. No, I said, standing to leave. I'm just someone who picked up the pieces after monsters like you tried to break me. The guard moved to escort her back to her cell, but I had one final message. Enjoy the next 12 years, I called out. I'll be sure to visit on anniversaries of your sentencing, just to see how you're adjusting to accountability. I walked out of that jail as a free man who'd achieved perfect justice. My enemies were destroyed, their crimes exposed, their victims vindicated. The corrupt system that had protected them was dismantled and rebuilt with proper oversight. I drove home to the empty house that had once symbolized my humiliation and failure. Now it represented something different, the headquarters of a man who'd turned invisible pain into visible justice. The only thing more dangerous than someone who's been broken is the person who methodically picks up every piece and reconstructs themselves into something their enemies never saw coming.